Hey everybody, it is Professor Parish and welcome back to English 122. This is week 12. We are in the home stretch of class, if you can believe it. We are really 3/4 of the way through after this week, so this semester is flying by. There's a couple assignments this week. We're going to finish up our discussion of drama this week, and then I want to go over the assignments that are going to be due. So, with that being said, let's go to the course content page and scroll down here. I'm recording this a little bit early, so your week 11 assignments are still due by Sunday night, but let's go ahead and talk about week 12. We are going to talk about chapter 29, and it's not mentioned on the course content here, and chapter 30 of our textbook. There's not a whole lot of terminology with these two sections, but we are going to finish up our discussion of drama with them. And then there are two assignments for this week. You're continuing working on your paper number 3. We're also going to have the discussion forum and then the MLA review. So let me talk about the MLA review first. It is due Sunday, November 8th, and I've got the guidelines pulled up here. So what you're going to do is basically, I've given you a type of source. So for example, I've given you bits and pieces of information about a print book, a magazine article, a journal article, and a web page. What I want you to do is to take each of these bits of information and put them in the correct order for MLA. So for example, down here, you're going to press enter twice when you download this off Word, and you are going to type out the citation in MLA format. With your titles of books, make sure that if you're typing these out that you italicize them, or if you handwrite your answers and send them to me in that format, that you underline them. So for example, book titles, you're going to want to highlight those and press the I to make them italicized. All right, and you're going to italicize and put in quotation marks the bits and pieces of these citations that you need to. So I'm mainly wanting to see if you can take this information and put it in the correct MLA format. That's pretty much what I'm asking. Each of these, numbers 1 through 4, are worth 5 points each, depending on how you write them out in the proper format. So that's the MLA review. Last week, and in week 10, we talked about MLA in terms of the citation presentation, so make sure you've checked out the video of that. It was in our announcements, and the citation presentation is also in our resources and handouts. So if you need a refresher, make sure to check those resources out. But that is the MLA review Dropbox. It's due Sunday. Your discussion forum, the posts are due Friday, and the responses are due Sunday. So let's look at that discussion forum real quick before we finish up our discussion of drama. For week 12, what you're doing is looking at the play Death of a Salesman in chapter 29. You don't have to read the whole play, obviously, but what I'm asking is just to kind of review the play and see what sets it apart, because Death of a Salesman is an American drama, so we're going to talk about American drama here shortly, but what sets Death of a Salesman apart from Greek tragedies and Shakespearean plays that we've looked at last week? Are there any similarities? Spoilers, there are, and I'm curious to see what you say about that. Question 2, American drama marks a distinct turn from what used to be captured in Greek and Shakespearean plays. What is this turn? So basically, what is different about American drama as opposed to Greek and Shakespearean plays? And spoilers, we're going to talk about this shortly when we review chapter 29. And then, is Willie Loman our protagonist? What's his struggle in the play? Can we relate to those struggles? And what's the overall theme? So there's quite a few questions being asked in this discussion forum, but they should be pretty easy questions to answer if you've looked at the play and if you've watched the rest of this video. So that is your discussion forum for this week. I always like the answer to number 3 because everyone's answers seem a little bit different. So I'm really curious at how you answer those for this week's discussion forum. But with that being said, if you go to your resources and handouts and you scroll down to where we start poetry, which is here in week 10, you'll see the drama presentation, and that's what we're going to finish out today. So the last 3 slides are what we're looking at. Slide number 10 is starting to talk about chapter 29, which is American drama. So up until this point, up until the 19th, 20th century, really the 20th century, up until the 1900s, most plays that were shown in big theaters and were circulated were either Victorian plays that were true to the times, or they were rehashes of Shakespearean plays or Greek tragedies. So the same types of plays had just been repeated over and over again across the centuries. And if you've ever read Victorian literature is probably one of my least favorite genres, actually, of literature, because, I don't know, I read a lot of Victorian lit in high school and college, and it was just rich people problems. I'm not a big reality TV person, because a lot of reality TV stars are like, life is hard. And I'm like, dude, you're living in a mansion. Like, I never got the appeal of the Kardashians. I just can't do it. Because I'm like, what is your struggle? So I felt like Victorian lit and Victorian plays were a lot like that too. They're like, oh, woe is us and our beautiful 1% life. And so by the time the Great Depression had rolled around, a lot of American audiences were feeling the exact same way I feel about the Kardashians. They just were over it. They're like, it's the Great Depression. People are poor. People are unemployed. There's this giant struggle. There's just been a world war. Like, everyone was just tired of having to watch plays about people they couldn't relate to. So, a lot of plays at the time were about kings and queens and Victorian aristocrats, and the American population just wasn't having it. So they wanted plays that reflected more characters that they could identify with. And that's where this subgenre known as American drama started. American dramas started as kind of a remedy of that, a solution to it. So these plays are more known for their realism. They're known for their ordinary lifestyles that are portrayed and connections to what we call the everyman or the layperson. People that are not kings and queens, they're not special or born rich. They're just average, ordinary people. And that's honestly what the American population really wanted at the time when American dramas started to show up on the theater scene. They wanted characters they could relate to. So these plays also did what we call chronological realism, which is the plays were happening in real time. There weren't these big flashbacks. There weren't, big scales and changes over time. It was all very contained. Like, the play would happen within the time span of a few days in terms of the play, instead of like years and years like in some Shakespearean plays. Now, I will say Death of a Salesman has a lot of flashbacks, even though it's an American drama, but the story itself takes place in a very contained amount of time. The same goes for Raisin in the Sun. And so these plays definitely dealing with themes about struggles and about trying to fit the American dream. What does that mean? What is the American dream? Is it achievable? And that was really what American audiences wanted to dive into and have developed in theater at the time. So it's a very big shift in the theme of plays and how they're constructed and what they're about. So I feel like this chapter is a really big turning point in how American audiences viewed theater and what plays could actually be about. Now, chapter 30 is dealing with comedy. And comedy's hard, y'all. Comedy is really hard. I feel like we all find certain things to be sad, but generally, if I say something is sad, we kind of all get a very similar idea, like death or struggles or losing a pet or a family member. Like, we all relate those things as being sad. Comedy is difficult because if Americans and people in general just find different things funny. Humor is really hard to pin down because something that I think is hilarious, my mom or my aunt may think is just really weird, or something that they find really funny, I may be like, oh, that's boring. What are you even laughing at that for? So we all find different styles of humor relatable to us. So comedy is really hard to pin down and do in plays. Comedy has also changed throughout history a lot. A lot of people think that humor nowadays is vulgar and crass. No. Humor has been vulgar and crass for centuries. If you go back and read some Shakespearean plays, and especially if you go back and read some Greek plays, there is some crude humor in those plays that is very, very, very explicit, especially compared to now. So there are three types of comedy that is discussed in this chapter. And these will be terms that you'll see on your final, so make sure that you get these memorized. There's 3 types of comedy, and they go in levels. So the top level of comedy, if you ever take Art 121 or an art class, you may hear the term high art and low art. High art being the more like sophisticated upper crust type of art, and low art being like a doodle. So that's kind of how this comedy works in this chapter. Satire is what we call high comedy. Satire deals with big concepts like hypocrisy, like social issues, things that are really, really kind of nuanced and complex, and it's humor that deals with that. So when I think of satire, I think of shows that are a little bit more dry, like Fargo, or the Coen brothers. They're famous for like their satires, like Burn After Reading. I would consider Twin Peaks to be a satire. Twin Peaks is kind of a satire of sitcoms and soap operas, but it's really complex and different. So it's not exactly a parody or a farce. But satire is very dry, and for a lot of people, I feel like satire, you either get it and you appreciate it, or you don't get it and you don't like it. The middle ground is parody. Parody is probably the most accessible type of comedy because it's distinctive. Like, you can understand a parody right when you see it. So like for Halloween, Scary Movie, that's a parody. It's making fun of horror movies. Cabin in the Woods is a parody. It's making fun of all the horror movie tropes, especially those that involve like the woods and Blair Witch Project, things like that. South Park is a parody. South Park can be a farce sometimes, but it's usually a parody. Like, they're making fun of very specific things, but they're easy to recognize. Between Two Ferns, that's Zach Galifianakis making fun of talk shows. Twin Peaks, I have it listed as a parody. It's kind of towing that line between parody and satire. And then obviously Monty Python is making fun of a lot of different elements, and that's a parody as well. So that's kind of the middle ground. I feel like if you're going to talk about humor, parody is the easiest to access. Satire, some people like, some people don't. And farce, some people like, some people don't. Farce is the opposite of satire. It is just crude, surface level humor. So Robot Chicken, Family Guy, stuff with what we call quote unquote easy jokes, body humor, those are all farce elements. They're easy to understand, but some people just find them a little bit too much and they may not like it. Gross out humor would kind of be in that farce category. There's not a lot of depth to the humor. It's all very like quick and instant laughs, but it may not be something that you think about longer than a few seconds. So satire, parody, and farce are the 3 types of comedy that you'll be asked about on your final. And then as far as other comedy terms, you have chase of wit, which is characters trading quick remarks back and forth for humorous effect. I always think of either Sherlock Holmes, the BBC special, where it's Watson and Sherlock arguing back and forth, or in Avengers, when Loki's like, we have an army, and Iron Man's like, we have a Hulk. Like, that's a chase of wit. That's a quick little banter back and forth between characters. Wordplay is verbal humor. So using puns, for example, that's a form of verbal humor as well. I find puns pretty funny depending on the context. If somebody's like, oh, it's raining cats and dogs, or if they're like, yeah, cool off. If like I always think of Batman and Robin, that film from the 90s. I think someone counted there's like hundreds of puns in the first 10 minutes. Arnold Schwarzenegger's Mr. Freeze, and he's like, chill out. And it's like, oh gosh, the puns. But you can look up puns on the internet and you'll find a whole slew of them. Stock characters are just characters people are expected to laugh at or find a certain use for. So, for example, in Beauty and the Beast, LeFou, his name is literally French for the fool. He is a stock character. His whole point is to be like a funny character. And then there's a term called tragicomedy. And I actually like tragicomedies a lot, but I kind of like some darker humor than most people. And it's often called black humor or dark humor, where it's a mix between something that's funny and something that's kind of sad. So it's trying to like balance out sadness and comedy. And there's quite a few of those. Crazy Little Thing Called Love, or there's a movie with Steve Carell, I think it's called Crazy Love or something like that. It's kind of a tragicomedy, sort of. but that's a specific genre of comedy that some people like, some people don't like. But yeah, that's basically the rest of our terms for drama. There's not a whole lot to talk about with comedy and American drama, but just those specific things to watch out for that make them distinct subgenres of drama and theater. So, with that being said, that is everything for this week for week 12. Not a lot to talk about this week. If you have questions about the MLA review, if you have questions about drama specifically, please feel free to let me know through email. But I will have this video out in our announcements down here out early this weekend, so you can feel free to go ahead and look at it. But otherwise, I hope you all have a very safe and fun Halloween. Take care, have a wonderful week, and I'll talk to you all again soon. Bye.